Hey everyone, Kyle with Andrew Hilton. Welcome to beer tasting number 72, which is focused on Born Colorado Brewing, which is out of Calgary, Alberta, despite Colorado being in the name. And also welcome to Vibration Station. We are getting our parking lot paved at the moment, and they're currently packing just exactly on the other side of this wall. So it's quiet for now, but it's been really loud for the last half hour. So we're kind of hoping that doesn't completely ruin the audio or jiggle the camera off its tripod or something. Yeah, it's been quite something tonight. So it's quiet for now. We're just going to roll with it. So, Born Colorado Brewing. Why are they kind of notable in Calgary? Well, they're right across the street from Cabin. Actually, last year for Neighbor Day, they released a beer, collaboration Cabin and Born Colorado, called 87 Steps, because there's 87 steps from the front door of Cabin to the front door of Born Colorado, which means they are right in the barley belt. You can go from Cabin to Born Colorado in a minute's walk. You can get from Born Colorado to Establishment, to Annex, to 88, to Banded Peak, even if we all kind of agreed we don't like Banded Peak right now because they got bought out, to Uncommon Cidery, to Confluence. It's all part of that core, really happening part of Calgary, but it's kind of the one we don't talk about. And to me, that's really interesting because I've driven by it a number of times. Now, with COVID, I hadn't actually gone inside because A, they're not open when I get there Tuesday mornings, and B, I don't know, I'd had the beers at a couple of events where I got in to taste like new products, and the beers were good, and I always wrote down, oh, these would be fun for the shelf, and then never got around to ordering them. So this isn't my first time trying them. I actually tasted them about 15 minutes ago to set the order for tonight. But yeah, this was actually my first day trying these Born Colorado beers in a lineup. So that'll be really fun. We are all going to start with their Golden Ale. I actually tried doing a bit of a deep dive on a golden ale versus a blonde ale. Turns out they're just literal synonyms. They mean exactly the same thing. So that really shoots my big cock about the first beer to hell, doesn't it? One thing I really noticed, though, was they list Centennial hops on the side of the can, which of like the classic old school hops like Cascade and Fuggles and Pearl and all the old school hops. It's by far my favorite. So I really love Centennial. I'm hoping Centennial will come out in this Golden Ale. Craig asked Confluence. Confluence is this super cool, it kind of started out as a bar, and then they started doing like pre-mixed cocktails, and now they're a distillery. They're right next door, I believe they're right next door to Cabin. There might be a bay in between them. But they've kind of become this super cool hotspot for like Calgary cocktail culture. I've never had any of their distilled stuff because I did see a sign that said they were now a distillery. I've had some of the cocktails. I've tasted some of their stuff. It's great. They're now doing some pre-canned cocktails. Like they have a grapefruit gin pre-canned cocktail, which I think you can only get there. You have to do it direct. I mean, we might end up with it because I'm at Cabin every 2 weeks. It's literally no problem to stop at Confluence. But yeah, they're kind of a big deal in the Calgary cocktail scene. Julie, absolutely. We will definitely set some of the Born Colorado beers aside for you, no problem. So, Golden Ale / Blonde Ale, what is it? Well, it's kind of the ale equivalent of pale lager. Now, that sounds really dismissive, but it shouldn't be, because the idea of making a pale, clean ale, as we've discussed ad nauseum here, goes back to the English invention of malting barley or kilning barley using coke or purified compressed coal, which created this pale, clean, light-colored barley that could actually be used for making beer rather than the darker-colored barleys that were available to that point. So, Golden Ale really is this beginner's beer. It's the first beer you usually will have. Like if you go to any brewery on earth and you sit down and you order the lineup, unless a lager specialist, the first beer on your paddle or oar or novelty shaped board that has holes cut in it for your beer sampling, it'll be served in shot glasses probably, because these breweries are basically all much of a muchness in that way. You'll get the Golden Ale or Blonde Ale, same basic thing. They tend to be low hop aroma, low hop flavor, at least in North America. We'll get to that in a second. and they tend to be very easy drinking, light, clean, not a lot of hop aroma, not a lot of yeast aroma, and again, based on the color, we're probably not going to get a whole lot of malt or barley characteristics here either, just because they're using very pale, very clean tasting malt. Now, on the other hand, the difference between a golden ale and, say, a pale lager is golden ales, unless you're talking about things like Molson Export or Labatt's 50, which were kind of the pale lager ale equivalents that were made in Quebec all through the 80s, 90s, and I think still to this day, actually. Those definitely have a high adjunct characteristic. Lots of corn, lots of rice, lots of, I don't know, ground up rats, whatever they're putting into it these days. Generally speaking, most craft breweries will be using 100% barley or a barley wheat blend to make their entry-level blonde or golden ale. So let's give this a taste. All right, Born Colorado, that smells very pretty, very clean. I would be really lying if I said I actually got the Centennial hops. I will also say my glass is slightly tainted because I had the Earl's ale in it last, and I did rinse it, but when we get to the Earl's ale, it has a lot of tea in it. I can still smell the Earl's ale in my glass. It's clean, it's dry, it's got a firm malt backbone, it's well made, it's well constructed. I would like a little bit more hop bitterness to this, and that's not just because I'm an IPA purist. It's actually because whatever yeast they're using on this, I get this real double bubble pink bubblegum character off of the yeast strain, and it's adding this sweetness to the beer that I don't feel has a counterpoint in the hops. And while I appreciate that it has a really cool, unique yeast note that reminds me actually of carbonic maceration or carbonic fermentation that they use for Beaujolais, I wish there was something to counterbalance against it. So Chris brings up the question, I guess I should stop saying I prefer golden ales over blonde ales. I did say that there was an exception to this rule. So in North America, I consider golden ale and blonde ale reasonably interchangeable. Golden ale in the UK actually got really jumped on by CAMRA, or the Campaign for Real Ale. And as a result, golden ale in the UK has become something of a watchword for very heavily hop aroma and flavored, but not very bitter, ultra low alcohol, like 2.1 to 2.8% alcohol, hop juice blonde ales that are all going by the name of golden ale. There's a beer called Summer Lightning, and I really should have remembered what the heck the name of the brewery was. But that style, this golden ale style from the UK of screamingly low alcohol, but also really pretty hops. The beer has effectively no shelf life. But if you're only making one batch a month and you expect to be sold out in 2 weeks, what's it really matter what the shelf life is? That's a really great strategy. Now, of course, all of that is predicated on the British pub culture, which we kind of lost with COVID. So I hope that this style, which we got bottles here briefly, but this isn't a style of beer that's designed to be bottled. It's designed to be a beer that goes directly from the brewery to the bar, hooked up on draft the next day, and gone by the weekend. This style of beer was not really designed for long-term shelf storage or export or any of that. This was something that was really dependent on pubs running. I imagine that this British golden ale style has definitely taken a knock with COVID, just because its primary market effectively evaporated for a year and change. Yeah, the one thing that really grabbed me my first pass through this was that yeast, and to me it really reminds me of pink bubble gum, specifically the dry double bubble 5-cent gum, which is probably now a quarter or something because inflation and I'm getting old. Yeah, the yeast to me is really distinctive on this, and I think it carries through, not so much when you get to the Earl's Ale, because the Earl's Ale just has so much going on, but certainly through the Golden Ale and the Autumn Amber, I definitely noticed that yeast as being probably the most predominant thing. I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. You mentioned Phillips. I agree that they certainly have a very particular yeast strain. And I'll actually bring up, you'll be shocked, I'll bring up Big Rock in a positive way before they kind of ruined Big Rock and they brought in all the ex-Molson guys. Big Rock actually had their own in-house yeast strain that they used for everything. Maybe they still do, but they're filtering the beer so aggressively with a high-pressure diatomaceous earth filter that it strips everything out. They actually had a really unique house yeast strain that they used for all of their ales, and it was subtle, but if you drank enough Big Rock, you always picked it up, and it was kind of like a lightly soapy floral thing that was very pretty. I still remember that quite fondly. This kind of reminds me, I don't think the yeast here is a flaw by any means. I think it's kind of a nice little signature, but coming into this brewery cold, having, maybe sampled it at a beer festival or two before, never having had it, at length, I found it a little bit jarring for a first try. And yeah, the yeast is either going to be really your thing or really not, and there's nothing wrong with either answer. Okay, let's move on into Autumn Amber. Once again, not a website that does a lot of explaining. And also amber and brown ales. And you could even say the same thing for golden and blonde. It's not really a style with a history. I would actually say that amber ale encompasses a lot of different styles. One could make an argument that browns are related to ambers, or that Bier de Garde, or Munich Dunkel, or I was going to say Weissburgunder, but that is Pinot Blanc. I was actually thinking Dunkelweiss. All of these kind of chocolate brown to amber colored beers, you could even say English bitter, you could say American pale ale, could all kind of be lumped in with this amber ale, red ale category, because it's describing a color. It's not really describing a long history of beer like something like Bier de Garde or India Pale Ale with a giant asterisk next to it because the early history of IPA is complete nonsense. No, amber ale, red ale, brown ale, even into golden and blonde ales, they describe a color. You could brew just about anything, Rickard's Red, that was made with terrible, terrible ingredients, Keith's Red. And as long as it kind of hit that color range, it's technically to style. And as a result, you think about the different styles of amber ales that are out there. You've got the Alaskan Amber Pretenders. Spectrum makes a fantastic one here in town that have that lightly smoked malt character to them, and that's like an Alaskan style amber ale. And then there was a really, really big deal in the Pacific Northwest. I don't think it exists anymore. It was called Mac and Jack's African Amber, and it was a very lightly hoppy amber ale. And that was kind of like a Pacific Northwest hoppy amber style that was its own unique thing. They never canned, they never bottled. It was just on tap. You had to go to like this list of 75 bars that had it on tap. And I went and I had it back in the heyday. It was fine. It was an amber ale. Who the hell cares? But it was really cool that it was its own thing. And then you've got the English-inspired ones that are kind of sort of like an IPA, but we don't want to call it an IPA. I'd say Mill Street's Tank House fits that mold. Then you get into things like New Belgium, where they're kind of going for like a Belgian candy sugar, lightly sweet, but we're using candy sugar, or dried sugar, like a caramelized rock candy sugar to be a fermentable. You've got all these things, and they're all broadly this color. And then you get into like Bier de Garde, which is kind of like Belgium's answer to barley wine. You've got all this weird stuff. And it's just because it's all this damn color. I find amber ale so frustrating because everything I just described, from Rickard's Red to Mac and Jack's African Amber to Spectrum Smoked Amber to this to whatever else I just talked about, it's all amber ale. Which means if you're every style, you don't really have one. It's a color. And I find that really frustrating. That said, I actually quite like an amber ale in fall, so let's give it a shot.
Holy.
Sam Adams as well, thank you. That's another really big one that I missed. Which again is a Boston lager, so not an ale, but really reminiscent of this because it's the right color. Sorry, amber ale gets me all fired up. Yeah, I definitely do notice a difference here. I think I tricked myself into it a little bit talking about Spectrum's excellent amber, because there's definitely that hint of smoke here. There's definitely that burnt sugar toffee characteristic. There's definitely some biscuit here. I'd even say there's maybe a touch of honey here. There's also those, I was finally reminded of the name, the really awful Halloween molasses candies that no one likes. They're called Halloween Kisses, as it turns out. I was in Shoppers on Sunday and I walked past a bag of them and was A, staggered that they had a specific name, they're called Halloween Kisses, and B, that people are still selling those in the year of our Lord 2021. How is that still a thing?
For Lord.
Ooh. Again, just like the Golden Ale, I'm getting a lot of sweetness here, and I think the sweetness is coming from the malt. The yeast sweetness is definitely there. I still get that bubblegum thing, especially in the finish. But again, I kind of feel like I'd like, not a hop explosion, but if you're very familiar with, say, Fernie First Tracks Brown Ale, not my favorite brown ale in the world, but what I will say, it's got a lot of Fuggles and it's got a lot of East Kent Goldings, or the North American equivalents, because those hops are right now really expensive. So probably something, I think Willamette would probably be the closest North American analog. They've got this spicy, rigid hop backbone that, you know, the sweetness builds and it gets richer and it gets rounder and it gets sweeter, and then it hits the hops and it kind of has to stop. It remains refreshing. I feel like if I had a whole can of these to myself to drink, and I guess I kind of do because I don't really share that much with Aaron, I feel like this would get very cloying, very sweet in a way the Golden Ale wouldn't. Let me know if anybody else here is really, really, oh God, Chris Hunt. Can we ban people from ever watching again? Chris Hunt likes Halloween Kisses.
I don't mind them either.
Do kids love them? I swear to God that those Halloween Kisses were the one thing, like when my brother and I went trick-or-treating, the one thing that was left in the pillowcase like the day before the next Halloween was just a big sack of Halloween Kisses.
Yeah, that's hard.
And like Rockets, the hard sugar pill candy things, just awful shit.
Things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you lost 3 molars on that.
Yeah, seriously. I still remember the snap that they give after they like kind of disconnect from your teeth.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, I mean, I described them as like an old people's candy. I wonder if now I'd like them, now that I'm like pushing 40. She's probably gonna get me a bag of Halloween Kisses for our Halloween episode.
Hell yeah.
But yes, I was at Shoppers West, not the one by the university, the one down by like the Save On Foods was where I saw them on the shelf. And I really do want other people's opinions. Like, where are we feeling on the bitterness with this? Is it a little too sweet? I don't think it has quite enough bitter backbone, but maybe that's just me. I'm curious. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, I drank the Golden Ale, the Autumn Ale, and the Earl's Ale in the coulee while I was making the promo.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I was maybe, I don't know, I got a little drunk quick, and I wasn't really paying attention as much to the flavors. However, this tasting, I think, I don't know, now that I'm focusing on what I'm tasting, like, I think they're actually pretty decent.
I think they're very good beers. They're
pretty decent, yeah. Like,
because
well
I'll say this,
actually.
I mean, what have we done for the last year? And we've done IPAs and sours and lagers, and you know, I've really tried to do things that were not one of those 3 styles, but in terms of what's been coming out, that's been about it. I really wanted to do something that's a little bit more malt focused. Is it the case that maybe these need a bit more hop bitterness, or is it just I've horribly broken my palate by drinking nothing but IPA, sours, and lagers over the last year? And yeah, I definitely do feel I have a need for this. The Autumn Amber, I think, and again, this is maybe giving away my rankings a touch early, I think of the Born Colorado line, I think that the 2 that are going to carry on with us are probably going to be the Milk Stout and the Amber, because I think they're both really, really good. Also, I'm curious. Now, it doesn't say Amber Ale. It says amber.
Huh.
Could this be a lager? I mean, I can't imagine it would be, because they don't make another. No, they do make another lager. They make a lager. I know they do. Could this be an amber lager?
I don't have.
That might explain the sweetness, actually, and the lack of spiciness. This could be an amber lager. In which case, who said Sam Adams? Bloody hell, who did say Sam Adams? Kevin did. That might actually be really prescient.
Tastes like Sam
Yeah.
Adams? Actually,
It does kind of taste like Sam Adams. Now that I'm thinking lager,
I have no idea.
yeah, it kind of does. I think I like it more than I like Sam Adams, but it's been bloody ages since I had a Sam Adams.
Sure.
And again, remember when Sam Adams, this is a few years ago, remember when they got like way into the craft beer movement and they started doing all these like freeze distilled beers that came in like frosted bottles and they were like 41%?
What?
Yeah, they made all these crazy beers that were trying to take on like Tactical Nuclear Penguin by Mikkeller and all those German crazy Eastbox and everything. They really made these super, super high alcohol beers. It was something like Sam Adams Millennium or something, and I know that name's wrong.
40% alcohol.
Yeah. And Kevin says it's a dead-on clone of Sam Adams, and he lived in Boston, so.
Crazy.
Ooh.
All right.
If Kevin lived in Boston, do we ask him how he pronounces chowder?
Oh man,
I know.
chowder.
Yeah, there we go. Anyway, sorry, that was from earlier.
Red or white?
Yeah. Okay, so let's get on to Arm Candy Milk Stout. Milk Stout's a really interesting one. This comes out about the same time in the 1800s that Oatmeal Stout comes out. Now, at this point, liquor and medicine are broadly interchangeable. If you read like old novels, it's like, by God, that man's having a heart attack. Let's give him a stiff tot of brandy.
Feed him brandy.
By God, that child's dying of malnutrition. A stiff tot of whiskey will perk him right up. It's alcohol was really perceived in a certain way to be analogous to food, to medicine, to whatever. And there's a real push, especially as people realize that things like chronic alcoholism, liver disease, obesity started to become concerns, that they needed to improve their image. Enter milk stout and oatmeal stout, things that people agreed were good for you, like oatmeal and milk. They started just putting it into the beer. And hilariously, both of these styles have, at least for the most part, again, going through that malaise era of beer of the 1950s to the 1990s, where a lot of really cool beer styles either died out completely or very nearly died out. Beyond that, there were some survivors of milk stout that actually made it all the way through. So in the early days, they actually did add whole milk to the beer, which would, do some really weird and funky things, including making the beer slightly sour because it would contain lactobacillus, but it would also include lactose, which is not fermentable by brewer's yeast. So you'd actually end up with this kind of cool sweet and sour thing. So what you have in milk stout is they no longer add whole milk. I don't think for any milk stout still made, except for maybe one or two like really crazy ones I've never heard of. But they do still add lactose. Now we've been talking a lot about lactose additions in IPAs, in like Cabernet, in a lot of sours. Milkshake IPAs, of course, almost universally have lactose added. It's become kind of a fairly common brewing ingredient. Where all that starts, though, is with milk stouts and with oatmeal stouts, and people in the 1800s trying to convince people that, oh yeah, it's like 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Laramie cigarettes. It's the same thing of, look, this is a horrible societal vice of alcoholism, but look, it's got oats and milk. It's so nutritious. And at this point, it was not uncommon for people to have, or even bring to lunch with them, in their metal pail growler, which would have a lid on it. They would bring beer to work to have and drink during the day, or at least during their lunch hour. So having something that was a little bit sweet, very nourishing, very fortifying to keep you through the day, was actually something of value. These days, Milk Stout has really exploded, along with Imperial Stout. It kind of took off in the late 2000s, very early 2010s, with beers like Bell Special Double Cream Stout out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, as well as Blackbridge out of Saskatchewan. Doesn't sell very well for me, which is why I don't sell it anymore, but they make a cracking good Milk Stout. So thoroughly enjoy them. Also, you'll see Cappuccino Stout, which are just coffee milk stouts. Kind of a stupid name, but I get it. So let's give this a spin. Yeah, and grandparents prescribed units. Thank you. Exactly. Okay. Comfortably my favorite so far. Here the sweetness plays really well with what is admittedly a very sweet beer style. If I maybe criticize the Autumn Amber for being a touch sweet, Milk Stout's supposed to be sweet. Here that sweetness is right at home. It plays very nicely with others. I think I've talked about this before, but I really, really enjoy a beer float. So a full pint of this with a giant scoop of really good chocolate ice cream right in there. This would be beautiful with that. No, this is... I always find Milk Stouts kind of a one and I'm done sort of thing because they are so sweet and so cloying, and I would want something different right after, probably something with quite a bit of bitterness just to break it up. But I gotta say, if I'm just having one, ain't nothing in the world wrong with that Milk Stout. I quite like that.
Yeah, it's good. This is the one I didn't get to try. It's good.
Because you got too outdoors drunk.
Why did... Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a question, Aaron. And then I ruined it.
Yeah, why did you... yeah, Aaron, the production guy. Why did you put the stout before the Earl Grey?
Because this is so big that I think it'll just destroy everything else. I tried having this stout after the Earl's Ale. When I first lined these up, that's actually the order that I had them in, was that. I can't taste anything after that Earl's Ale. It's just huge.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the arm candy, and especially the pairs well with burgers and beauties, or spicy food and spicy people, or... Oh, Christ, I mean, sunsets and such. Just no. I don't like the name. It's not as bad as, oh God, there's a really, really, really awful one. My friend and I call it Misogyny Brewery. They're in Missoula, Montana. They're in this old like warehouse. And all of their names are like super, super sexist. Like Scepter Head IPA. Oh, everything's great, except her head. Yeah, it's all like that. It's all these awful, awful, like, not even really funny in the 1970s misogynist jokes is all of their beer names. Yeah. And it's in Missoula, which is actually a fantastic beer town. But yeah, this is just this really awful brewery. This isn't on that level at all. I don't know. The puns just don't land for me. Or are they puns? Are they just bad jokes? Is there a difference between the two? It doesn't land for me anyway.
Well, if you're serious about tasting beer, like you want like actual, tasting notes that go really well with it.
And actually, Chris has got a good call here. I don't know if it's mint, but there's something that reminds me, and you're right, it's not a real mint, it's like a fake mint. When you said that, it actually was playing with the chocolate and like Girl Guide's Thin Mint cookies. It doesn't really taste like mint, but it tastes like, After Eights or Thin Mints or something like that. It tastes like manufactured mint. But yeah, there's definitely something there for that, and it's just a very, very light hit. Normally when I say mint, I would usually think that's tied in with the alcohol level, but it's 6.5, and with how much sugar is in this, we shouldn't be tasting the alcohol as being minty or mentholy at 6.5. I expect it like 8.5. So maybe something, and again, when I kept going back to like that double bubble spicy pink bubblegum thing, there's definitely a spicy mint character to that. That might be what's coming through here. giant tangents about Missoula breweries aside, I really like that. That's quite good.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what's coming next week, which is not beer. We're going to take a beer break, and we're going to do some cider. So we're going to do 4 ciders. Starting out, we're going to start where you got to start. We're going to start with Revel Cider. This is, of course, it's the elephant in the room. It's the most important cidery in Canada by a mile. This is Tariq Ahmed's cidery. He makes all the crazy, like, $18 to $25 wine bottle ciders that we carry. Just a ridiculously good cider maker. Hilariously, the weakest selling of his ciders are actually like the little cheapy $5 cans. So you know what? We're gonna do one of those. We're gonna do his. It's the time and place? Time and place, yes. And then we're going to contrast that. We're going to go all the way over to the west side of the country with Creek and Gully out of BC. This is their Flora, which is a field blend of various types of apples. Alcohol rises here to 7.6. We've done a Creek and Gully before when we did the Canadian tasting with Brett Rowland. We actually did do the 750 ml glass bottle from Creek and Gully. We did their Pet Nat cider. This is a new one for them that actually I was introduced to because Steel and Vines down in the old Alec Arms, they brought this in for their own list and I loved it, so I had to bring it in for us as well, and now we're going to taste it. Lastly, from Calgary, a lot of Googling that happened. I couldn't actually confirm that Core Values is made at Uncommon, but I keep feeling like it is. I'll be doing a lot of digging into that. Regardless, 2 Calgary ciders, or Calgary area ciders. Core Values, this is their return to the Mac. It's a semi-dry Macintosh apple cider. And then from Uncommon, just because all it is straight apple, I actually went with their Haskip apple blend, just to give us something a little bit different, and also because I really like their Haskip apple cider, just because it's something a little different. And I don't know, I think red berries are kind of fall-ish. Maybe it's just thinking of cranberries and turkey and that sort of thing at Thanksgiving, but I like red berries in fall, so it's just a nice fall cider tasting, something fun. So, all that next week. Looking at that, I'm really wondering how the hell we're breaking even on it, but that's a problem for another day because I've already announced it. Okay, Earl's Ale. Earl Grey Tea Pale Ale. Of course, we've had the King's English from Annex Brewing. We also had the Afternooner from Situation Brewing out of Edmonton, which was another tea pale ale. I swear we've had at least 1 or 2 more. This is our latest one. This was actually the one that was kind of the impetus to this. Again, I was trying to put together a collection of fall beers, and I kind of looked around, and most of the styles I wanted to talk about, like ambers and stouts and different tasting things, Born Colorado had basically all of those. So once we were already at kind of 3 Born Colorado beers I wanted to do, we added the Golden Ale at the end and kind of made it a Born Colorado tasting. I think on this one the tea is a lot. This tea is gonna stick with you. And yet, I say that, it's a lovely tea. I get lavender, I get the orange pekoe, I get the tea leaf. Do I want to read the punny thing on this? Of course I do. Pairs well with brunch and besties. And no.
The Queen.
And the Queen, yes.
Holy shit.
What do you think, Aaron? Is it enough tea?
I think that's the one that ruined it for me in the Coulee.
It's a lot of tea.
Honesty.
Yeah, it's a lot of tea and it's a lot of sweetness.
Honesty.
Like, it's not just off dry. Like, it's full on sweet to me. And yeah, vanilla is right there.
Yeah, it's like birthday
lavender
cake.
is right there. Rosemary is kind of coming through in an odd way. I don't know about that. I don't know if I could actually get through an entire can of that on my own. It's wonderful, but it's just so much. Like, this is something I'd want to share a can with someone.
All the things.
No, it's not all the things. It's not all the that is completely off base. Nope. This is not all the things at all. This is big, it's loud, it's semi-dry, it's unapologetic about it. Would I like it to be less sweet? Sure. I appreciate just how balls to the wall they went with this. I just don't know if I could get through like this much of it all at once. I'm glad I'm having it, but I'd want to share cans with people. People picking up on prunes to the face.
Prunes to the face.
Well, I'm glad Craig and I at least kind of get in again. And yeah, Megan, I'm with you. Like, I think the beer is really, really cool. A pint's a lot. Like, there's still most of a can here, and Aaron and I both have a glass, and like,
That's all I need.
that's gonna take me a while to get through. 473 mils of this, like 473 mils of this would go down in 10 minutes. 473s of this would take me an afternoon. That's a really intense beer. I like it, but I kind of feel like they might have dialed back the tea just a titch, and maybe this would have had a little better balance. But you know what? I'll say this. Better that than it be boring and timid and insipid. And you know what? We went into this tasting, like the question we wanted to ask was, why don't we talk about Born Colorado more? It's not because they're not willing to take risks. Maybe it's packaging, maybe it's marketing. I would actually really heavily lean into its marketing. I went trying to do the research for this, and I went looking for like videos with like introductions or interviews with the head brewmaster to try and find that. The number 7 video result for Born Colorado Brewing is our promo for this beer tasting. I imagine that after tonight, the number 1 video result for Born Colorado Brewing will be this beer tasting. Perhaps they could do just a touch better job talking about themselves out there. I don't think the reason that Born Colorado doesn't get talked about enough is the beer. Certainly it's not cowardice. It's not the we're afraid to try new things, as the Earl's Ale shows. I think these are really solid beers. I don't know, maybe they just never captured the hype train the way that Cabin did. I mean, I will admit that their packaging doesn't quite live up to the same standard as Cabin or Establishment or 88's really, really good packaging, but you know what? If you're at Cabin, if you're at Confluence, I mean, this is right across the street. I think this is worth a look. I'm certainly going to carry on with his arm candy all through the fall, and we're at least going to give the amber a try. I don't think I'm bringing these in, and for different reasons. This, I would consider bringing in singles. I just can't see anyone getting through a 4-pack of that myself. The Golden Ale, it's just because I think that there's other beers that do this just as well or slightly better. I would reference things like Annex's Good Authority, Clock Out by SYC. Yeah, the Golden Ale's solid. I just think there's other beers that do the exact same thing, maybe slightly better. These two, though, not only are they underrepresented styles in the store, I really like that milk stout. I think that's a winner. Rankings for me are 1, 2, and then a bit of a gap, and then 3. Neither is really for me, and for very different reasons. This is brilliant. I love that they just swung for the fences with it. I just think they got a little too much tea going on. This was lovely, and I think they did a really nice job. But just like the amber, I think I would have appreciated a little bit more hop backbone just to give it something to set it apart. And I would be willing if they didn't make a lager, if they didn't make a beer that was like a step below this to be entry level. I think I'd be more generous with this if this was their entry level beer. But it's not. They actually have like an everyday lager for the Bud Light drinker that goes into Born Colorado. I think that this would be better with just a touch more firmness. So too would be the amber, but if they're going for a Sam Adams clone, and it's a damn good Sam Adams clone, I don't drink Sam Adams, but if that's what they're going for and it's an amber lager, can't really fault them, because in a amber lager, the bitterness I was looking for would be inappropriate. So I mean, he was born in Colorado. Wade Brown, their head brewer. I mean, that's kind of his thing. And Colorado is a very, very famous brewing state. Like after California, I'd probably say Colorado. Well, after California, Washington, Oregon, I'd probably say Colorado's right there. With breweries like New Belgium, of course. You've got Marble Brewing. You've got any number of others. But yeah, I know that, and like some other really geeky people probably know that about Colorado, but I mean, most people, if you said Colorado, they'd say the Avalanche. Like, I don't know what else you'd really talk about.
The Avalanche. Colorado.
Craig finally gets the tea after 2 minutes of not drinking it. Yeah, there's a bit of tea. Oh, God. Okay, so Kevin actually said that last year this was drier, a lot of sugar, a lot of vanilla. Yeah, I think if this was drier, it would be a little more interesting. I will say I think that King's English by NX was pretty much what they were going for, and I think did a better job. I mean, granted, I'm a giant NX fanboy, but you know, I'm just going to be honest on that one. It does have to be tough from being across the street from Cabin, but at the same time, they basically do a collab with Cabin every year for Neighbor Day, and that has to be great for their marketing. Like, I don't know. Kind of a mixed blessing. Do you go to Bourne, Colorado while you wait to get into Cabin? Do you kind of hop across the street back and forth? Do you go to Bourne, Colorado because you couldn't get into Cabin? Or do you go to Bourne, Colorado on its own merits? I would actually say that Cabin's probably a better spring-summer brewery, especially when they're pouring summer saturation. But if I was going and it was minus 30 and I knew that Cabin would have their usual lineup of IPAs, whereas across the street at Bourne, Colorado, I could get this Milk Stout and Amber, I might be leaning towards Bourne, Colorado in that case. So, yeah, kind of fun. And apparently the tap room at Bourne, Colorado needs some improvements as well. I would really like to try that. I haven't been in there yet, so. All right, I think we are done. Thank you all so much. We will see you next week for cider. I'm Kyle. That was Aaron. Thank you all so much for joining us. This was fun. I appreciate you all very much for joining us. Good night.